Okay, we're on the ground. Yes, we are, because that's where I do most of my best work. Welcome back to the Voodoo Garden. My name is Ray. I will be your host. I got my plants here. I'm all ready to go. First plant we're going to be transplanting is, I call it the little booger, but if you want to be technical, you can call this a jade plant. Yes, it's a little teeny tiny plant. If you want to see what these are, go to the previous episode and you can get a real good close-up look of what these are. I don't have time to bring them over to the camera right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out of the pot. Now when you transplant a jade into a pot, you want to make sure that the soil level, first you put in some soil, and then you put the pot in there. And you want to make sure that it's going to rest about maybe an inch or two lower than the top of the pot. The reason for this is when jades grow, they will grow up and out, and their stem will thicken as it grows, and it turns into a woody stem. It starts out looking green, but as it ages, it turns into a woody stem. And also, the lower leaves will slowly shrivel up and die as the upper part grows. That's the nature of a jade plant. It's a succulent, and which means it can go for a long time without water. And also, if it loses a leaf or two, it's not going to hurt this plant. So every now and then, I just pick the leaves off. You can take these leaves, by the way, pull them off, stick them in soil, and half the time they'll grow a new plant. Yep, you can actually take cuttings off of that just by taking the leaves off. Now, as this grows up, I want to make sure that I put more soil up around the base of the stem, because a few roots here and there will grow out of the stem if it's buried. So what I did was I placed it in like this. Okay, we're all set. Let's take the jade out and get it in there. Have the pot upside down, pop it out. Well, that was easy. Okay, yep, I actually dropped this right before this scene. I came back, sat down, bang! What can you do? All right, I am a little bit clumsy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some leaves off the bottom, just like that. You just pinch them right off. And the reason I do that is because I'm going to be putting soil up a little bit on this stem, and I don't want leaves buried. There we go. That is all set to go. This is going to be buried just a little bit lower than the top of the pot. Set it in there. Place soil around it. Now, transplanting this is a breeze. Yeah, I do get a little bit of dirt on the top, but I shake it and the dirt falls off of it. I'm really not that gentle when I do these because, you know, plants are very, very tough. People coddle plants a lot, but they actually don't realize that plants are so much tougher than you might think. They get bashed around by wind, rain, animals kicking them all over the place. I'm going to tap it like that. Tap it like that. This one's a little bit buried over on the side. I'm going to tap it like that. And I believe we are all set to rock and roll. Yep. There we go. Get some water. Rinse off the leaves. Now when you water your plant after you transplant, you want to water this, but you don't want to focus on this. You want to water around the edge, because this part probably already has some moisture in it. You want to water around the perimeter, and that's usually where you see the roots on the old root ball, because you want to encourage them to grow out. I only water in here to get the dirt off of the plant so that it'll be in the light, not buried. Give it a little bit of water. Now, by the way, when I mixed up this soil, let me show you the soil there. By the way, that is done. Let me show you the soil that I'm using in case you want to do this as well. I told you in a previous episode I was going to make my own soil. Well, I don't have all three ingredients. I only have two. I used coir, which is cocoa peat. That's nothing but the hairs shaven off of coconuts, rinsed, aged, and shredded up into like a fine dust and then compressed. You add water and it goes poof! And it's a beautiful, rich product. I mixed it with vermiculite, and that's all I did. There are no worm castings, so this is 100% nutrient free. There is no nutrition whatsoever in this soil. It is literally nothing but a filler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to water with my mild organic fertilizer. It has a 333 NPK rating, and that will gently feed this plant each time I water. And as leaves die, I'm just going to let them rot on here, and little by little, the decomposition of old roots, old leaves, some of the organics that go into here, that will kickstart this soil into a living, breathing thing, literally bringing life into lifelessness. I know that's a Star Trek reference, but it makes perfect sense when it comes to this soil. So there we go. A perfect start to a perfect day. Let's go on to the next one. Just stay right there. Okay, let's get rid of this soil. Toss it back into the container. bring over our second prop, which is a very heavy bucket of water, because we're going to need that. The next plant on the agenda is the Croton. You saw this in the previous episode. This is the size pot that I want to use. So I'm going to pick it up, set the pot aside. Now, this has 2 plants in it. I need to separate these plants. So this is a little different transplant method than the Jade. What I'm going to want to do is flip this over, push it down, get the pot off, and this is exactly what I expected. I expected to see roots intertangled. Now, of course, I could separate this just by grabbing the 2 plants, and this is a very common method. People will grab the 2 plants and rip them apart and set them in soil, and that is usually successful. Or they will take a knife and literally slice it right down the center like Solomon and replant them like that. That can be successful, but in my opinion, in my experience, that is a whole heck of a lot of damage to the roots, and a plant spends an inordinate amount of time replenishing those roots, because you just took it from a greenhouse to your house. There's shock. You're taking it from one pot to another. There's another type of shock. You're ripping the roots to shred. There's another kind of shock. You know what? This plant deserves a medal for surviving that type of problem. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little jacuzzi here. I'm going to rinse it off. Just vibrate it into the water. Take a look. Yep. Hold it by the leaves. These are very tough leaves, by the way, so you can do that. Shake it like this. It only takes a minute. And by the way, like I said, this water you can reuse again. Tickle the roots with the fingers just a little bit. Shake it a little bit more. This isn't guaranteed to loosen all the roots, but it gets the soil off and it allows you to see what you're doing. Now watch this. Look at that. Yep. Perfect root structure on both of these. I'm going to just toss this in the water. It'll just set in there and wait until I'm done with this. These roots have not been torn apart, mashed. They're a perfect flare, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. As for what size pot, that's a matter of, I guess, personal preference. This pot is going to be perfect because it's going to take a while for these roots to fill out this pot, and it gives me time to figure out where I want to put it, because if I put it in a huge pot, it would be a floor model, and real estate on the floor is pretty scarce. I can put this on a counter a lot better. It's going to look good in this pot. So let's get the soil in there, because like I said, the less time in the air, the better. I'm going to toss this in the water until we get our soil done. Okay. Soil's about there. Let's go get our plant. Put the leaves up like this. Okay, that's about right. And this, of course, gets dirty because you got your hands in this. I barely put the soil around there. Now, as far as Crotons going, burying them deeper, there really isn't that big of a need for that. Uh-oh, I just smashed one of these leaves. Oops, well, that's what happens. It goes into the compost pile. Nothing goes to waste here in the Voodoo Garden. Now you can see that these roots are fibrous, and the soil may just hover around the outside, and then there would be that crown of roots on the inside. You don't want that. You don't want air in there. So when you put the soil in here, let me show you a little trick. It's a common sense trick, but then again, like I say, I don't take it for granted that you know everything. So if some of the stuff I do is redundant or a little simplistic, forgive me. I'm just trying to help. All right. Now we got the soil in there, but as you can see, I didn't push soil into those roots. I'm going to hold this plant steady and go like this. You shake it, vibrate it. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that soil, if it's nice, fluffy soil, and put it into those roots. You may have to put more soil in here, but I don't think so. Maybe just a tad. Don't pack it down. Let's give it a little bit of water, rinse all the dirt off the leaves. And this water will also help settle the soil around the roots. And we're going to have a nice, easy start for this plant. Now, it's also a good idea when you're doing this, if you have a water catching tray underneath, remove that. Look what I'm doing. See? Let me get this over the bucket of water. Actually, I'll just do it right here. We're going to take this off and let the water drain through. All right, we got the bottom off. We're just going to let that set there and drain while we do our next one. Pothos, you didn't get a good close-up of this last episode. Take a look at that. That is a beauty. Yep. Now, Pothos, of course, is I can tell you right now, this is going to have a good, healthy root system. Vines always do. And this one has all kinds of good stuff down here. I believe that this was a younger plant down here, and they buried it deeper because you can see the green stem here. Now, I'm not going to break this apart because vines like this, you're going to have multiple plants. It's always good to have more than one in there. So let's just set this in the water. Ha! Water. Get some soil in here. And I would normally put it in a larger pot, like a 10-inch pot, so that it has room to spread out. But you know what? Ray doesn't have any 10-inch pots. Nope. Ray does not have any pots yet. He's been going fast and furious with his garden, so he doesn't have any 10-inch pots. This will survive in a 6-inch pot, like this one, for months, probably a couple months easily, until I can get my plants out in the garden and then free up some of my 10-inch pots. And then I can transplant. And after a couple months, it's going to have root system going out into the soil and be more acclimated. Okay, let's hurry up and get this in here. This soil is really moist. The stuff that I mixed into this coir, check it out. Watch this. Yep, moisture. That's the wonder that is coir. People can promote anything they want, but I'll tell you what, I don't care what anybody says. I am sold on this product, and I will never stop spouting about how wonderful this stuff is, because it is just amazing. And once you try it, you're sold. I tell you what, once you try this stuff, you wonder how you ever went with that crappy soil that rejects water and water floats on top of it and stuff. This is fantastic stuff. Okay, pack, pack, pack. Now, you saw how moist that soil was. You know what? I don't even have to water this, because that soil that I used, this stuff here, I just grabbed a handful. I just showed you that. Now watch this again. Look at all that water. As long as this soil is in decent contact with that root ball, I don't even have to water it. This is done. You let this drain through. And what this does normally, normally you have drier soil. So normally you want to make sure that you water it until water runs out the bottom. That way your first watering is a complete watering. You want to make sure that that soil is moist. Normally if you water, you hit it on the top and you go, well, that seems like enough. No, it's not. You're going to need water underneath that root ball, on the side of that root ball, because you only have one chance to make a good first impression with your plant. And that means the world to this plant, because it has one shot to get watered right, to get acclimated right, and if you mess it up, it's really hard to correct the situation. So I'm going to set this off to the side, and we're going to do our last plant of the day. Well, first of all, we got to get rid of this water. Back into the water container it goes. All right, boys and girls, we have come to the top of this program, and this is the big one. Yep, this is the dragon tree I showed you on the previous episode. Beautiful plant. Now this plant is going to be even better once we get done with it. Now, the Croton, I told you that we needed to split it into two pieces and put it into another pot. We could do the same with dragon trees, but unlike the Croton, dragon trees tend to look better if they're grown in groups. You always see them like that. You always see like 2 or 3 in a pot when you see these things in the greenhouse. That's because they seem to look better that way. It's just for looks mainly, not for so much for health. And you know what? I'm going to continue growing these 2 in the same pot because I do like them grouped together. But what I'm going to do, and this is what's important, you want to make sure that you promote the stem, because this thing is a tree. This is a trunk. This is a very new tree, and it's going to form a trunk. One way to do that is to start this way. You take a leaf at the very bottom. You look around here, it'll have a leaf, and then a leaf up here, then a leaf up here. It's like a stair step going all the way around. You want to start at the lowest leaf, grab it by the base, and put your finger on it and push straight down. And you'll hear that little snap. That doesn't hurt it at all. Then you go to the next one in line, right over here. Same thing. Just push it right down. Don't pull out, don't pull up. Push down. That is the key, and that's where everybody makes a mistake. When I say remove the leaves, they go yanking on it, and that can harm the tree. You want to take that leaf and push down like that. Don't cut it, don't yank it, and once you get the hang of it, you just be snapping these things off. Yep. And what you want to do is with a dragon tree, you want to remove these lower leaves And what that'll do is, where they're removed here, that heals up very, very fast. These plants are really wonderful at that. And this will toughen up and turn like a grayish brown, and that is your trunk. Yes, indeed. It turns into a trunk, and then as this thing grows, basically, as it puts out new leaves, the lower ones start dying. And as the lower ones die or start drooping, you remove those. Now, I'm going to remove these just a little bit, okay? Not a lot. And by the way, any part of this trunk that's buried will sprout roots. Keep that in mind. So we're going to bury this just a little bit deeper than it originally was. These plants, even though they have a lot of leaves along the trunk like this, they always grow better. They do. They grow better when you remove the lower parts of the leaves here on the plant. Because what that does is it removes the stress off the plant, and it can put all its energy into the top, and that's where you want the energy to go. You want this to form into trunks and to grow like a tree with a tuft on top, similar to a palm tree. You don't want a bush. You want a long, slender, graceful tree. And there you have it. Beautiful, isn't it? Yep. And that is the look. That is what I wanted to show you. That is the beautiful trunked look that you see on all of the nice older specimens, and that's how you get that look. That is how it's done. And as this grows, you'll see nice new green growth coming out of here. And as this grows, I can't tell you how often or when or how many, you just have to gauge that. Every now and then you remove a leaf from the bottom as it's growing leaves from the top, and you leave a tuft of stuff, maybe about a foot or so high of leaves growing out of the top, and then you remove everything else out of the bottom. Eventually these things will reach like 6 to 8 to 10 feet tall. They'll get huge, and even taller than that. And the trunks will actually get thicker too as it grows. These grow really well root bound in a pot, oddly enough, as long as they're fed. So you don't have to worry about putting this in a monstrous pot, but you want to make sure you put it in a large pot with a wide base, because you don't want these things falling over. These things grow best indoors. If you're growing them indoors, it'll grow best indoors in a very bright, diffused sunlight, like through a sheer curtain, or in a sunny window, but not up against the window, because if it's right up against the window, just like any other plant, it could fry during midday sun, because sun coming through a window, if that's right by the window, it can jack up to like 150, 180 degrees. Yeah, and no plant can take that kind of temperature. And if they do, they're lucky. Count your blessings. But generally, move this about a foot or two away from the window. It can take the direct sunlight, but that way you have a buffer between the plant and the window for the air to get around, and it doesn't roast the plant. But this plant will love it. Now here is something that you may not know about the dragon tree. If you forget to water it and it gets really dry, if it wilts, you know, like normally if a plant wilts, the leaves go down, and then when you water it, the leaves come back up. Guess what? Dragon tree is the one plant that will never recover from not being watered. If you don't water it, what will happen is, you've seen this on a lot of them, their leaves are like this. Yeah, you normally see their leaves curl down. That's because once their leaves wilt, they stay wilted. I mean, they'll perk up once they get water and get stiff again, but they will never point straight up again. They will always curve down. And that's generally what these plants look like. That is a healthy look for the plant, because what will happen is these will curve down, and that gives it the nice graceful soft look down here, but then you have the spike of leaves growing out of the top, and these generally are always nice and fresh and don't droop. So you're going to have the spike here, you're going to have the gentle curving here, and you're going to have the trunk here. That is a dragon tree, and that's how you take care of it. Now, when you water it, give it a good solid soaking with some mild fertilizer, and then let the soil dry out. They love having their soil dry out, and it also promotes that root growth. Then you give it another soaking. Now take a look at this. Let's take this thing out of here. Yep, that's what I thought. Yeah, I know these plants well enough to know their pattern. Look at this. Well, it's just amazing how dirty everything gets in this room, but that's just the nature of the game. Okay, I'm going to bury these so that the root ball is a few inches underneath the soil, because I don't want it too close to the surface. And this one's going to go to one side. Now that's what you're going to do if you're separating these, and I'm sure a lot of you will want to do that. You separate them and you put one on one side. You separate the roots, and that way they won't grow all together. I know it's going to look like a whole lot of roots, and you might think, well, why don't you root prune those? Because some folks will tell you, you need to prune the roots when you do this kind of stuff. No, you don't. You want as many roots as possible. If this plant doesn't need the roots, it'll decide to sacrifice the roots. But no, don't you go doing that, because this plant needs all the help it can get to get acclimated. Okay, so we have this settled in here, and we even got roots coming out of the stem too. You might have seen that when I had it up close. And what I want to do is I want to separate these, and that way, as they grow taller, they're not going to be all clustered together. And that's going to benefit them. Now, as I'm planting these, I'm burying about, I don't know, 2/3 of the stem that I bared by taking those leaves off. And that's going to help this plant immensely. It has all those roots down at the bottom, and the stem where it's buried is going to put down roots as well in time. So it's going to have a double whammy of good going on for this plant. Yes, sirree. Yes, sirree. And that's all we're going to have to do. Now, normally I would water this, but I showed you how wet the soil is. Look at that. Nice, nice. I know it's a floor model, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted this to be in a decent sized pot. And the thing is that once you decide how you want to grow these things, it's probably a good thing to get them in that large pot, because once these things, by the time this needs to be transplanted, it's going to be like 7 feet tall. I'm not going to want to be doing that, so this pot will probably be its home for quite a long time. I'm going to be one heck of an old man before this thing needs to be transplanted, but that's how you transplant a dragon tree, and that's how you show off the stem and get it going good. If you grow 3 of these in here, it looks even better, but if you grow them close together, as they grow, you can gently move them over and then tie them over, move them over, tie them over, and braid the trunks together. That, you know, some people like that look. I really don't. I don't like that look at all. So I like to grow them separated, and that's how they're going to do in the Voodoo Garden. That's how we do it here. That's the transplanting. I hope you enjoyed it. And next episode is the Grand Tour. Don't forget it. I got to clean up. This is Ray in the Voodoo Garden. We are out of here. Bye.